I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 417. And today in the show, I'm joined by Sam Soholt, the co-founder of Public Land Tees and well-known for his public land bus adventures. And we're diving into 10 very specific actions you can take today for conservation. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light. And today we have got Sam Soholt. And Sam is most well known for his public land bus and public land van adventures. If you follow those at all on YouTube or social media or in the countless other media places he's shown up, you probably know what he's been up to. He also is one of the co-owners of Public Land Tees. And Sam's story is really cool because, you know, Sam was just a regular hunter. He's just a guy like you or me who loved to chase deer and get outside and hunt critters and enjoy the great outdoors. And after doing that for a whole lot of years, though, he realized that he wanted to do more. He realized that he could do more to help protect public lands and wildlife and healthy habitats. And so he decided, you know what? I'm going to go from just being a person that goes out there and hunts and takes pictures and does this kind of stuff. And instead, I'm going to try to make a difference. And since that point, he's been doing it. He's been living that mission and making a big difference. And so it seems to me that he is the perfect person to help us wrap up our month-long conservation series because, you know, we've talked about a lot. We've talked to Randy about public lands. We talked to Matt and Adam about private land management work that you can do on your own ground. We talked to Whit about a lot of different public and private land related conservation policies, regulations, laws that might be considered. So we've kind of covered all of that stuff. And there's been a lot to talk about. The question, though, that I think I had coming out of this, and maybe some of you guys too, is, okay, now what? You know, there's so many different things that were discussed. I think it's fair to say that it could be overwhelming. There's so many different issues you could worry about or things you could do or actions you could take. And I think what I wanted to try to do today here was to talk through some concrete ideas, give you guys 10 specific ideas for how you could take action to help conservation efforts, to do something good for the wildlife we love chasing, for the wild places we love to spend time in, and in a way that we can give back. And so what Sam and I have done is we've brainstormed, kind of looking at our own experiences and then also looking back at the conversations we've had already this month about these topics with Randy, Whit, and Adam and Matt. And we've put together our top 10 action items. So this is a bunch of different ideas. Some of these will be realistic for some of you not so much. So pick and choose. But my encouragement to you is to give this a listen and see if there's one or two things here that is a good fit for you that you could try to take some action on and move that needle. I think we can all do it. If nothing else, this is for me, I guess. This is a great a way I'm trying to remind myself, okay, here are some tangible things you can do to do something that's going to help. Because it's easy to see the news or see something pop up online and think, damn, another bad thing happened in this place I care about, or another, public land thing that's going to go down the tube. And it can seem so overwhelming or out of our hands. And sometimes it just feels really good to do something about it. And so today, our hope is to give you a few ideas for how you could do that. So we're going to dive into Sam's story a little bit, learn a little bit about his history, learn a little bit about what it was for him that took him from being a hunter to being a hunter advocate, conservationist, public land promoter, and protector, and all that kind of good stuff. And then we dive into these 10 specific ideas. So hope you enjoy this one. I hope this is a helpful way to wrap up this series. I think it is. It definitely was helpful for me, and I'm excited for you guys to give it a listen, and then for all of us to get after it. So with that, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for tuning in to this Conservation Month series. And now let's get to my conversation with Sam Soholt. All right, I've got with me on the line now Sam Soholt. Sam, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been, I feel like it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I just was thinking the very same thing. Like, why hasn't this happened yet? It is 100% an oversight on my part. And I know we talked in the past about making it happen, and then logistics and different things ended up getting in the way. So I'm glad it all worked out, and thanks for making the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just, appreciate you having me on. And, during the spring, it's, it seems like a very good time to sit down and do this before the craziness that is the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's definitely the truth. So, I briefly introduced folks to you in the little introduction that I record before these conversations, but I got to hear it from the horse's mouth. When people ask you what you do, how do you answer that question? Because it's not as easy as someone who says, like, I'm a doctor, or, I work on cars. You kind of have a complicated answer. What do you tell people?
For a long, long time, I just told people that I was a photographer, freelance photographer, videographer. But I've been trying to figure out what a better explanation of what I do. And it would probably just be like content creator / public land and conservation advocate.
Oh, that rolls off the tongue. Really nice. but okay, I kid.
So
explain.
It's way too long. But so it's been in the whatever quote unquote hunting industry for 10 years now, and started off as just doing mostly videography, kind of transitioned into a lot more photography. And then about 4 years ago, started down this journey of kind of transitioning and using everything that I'd learned in photography and video to really promote and raise awareness and raise money around conservation and help educate people on how they can get involved. And so what started as was, just a passion for the outdoors and the love for hunting, and, photography and videography was a way for me to get paid to do those things. Transition into doing what I can and what we can as a company to protect those resources so that future generations have those same opportunities.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that kind of transition. But was there any one thing or moment or time period that was like the catalyst for that jump, or was this just like a slow evolution for you?
No, the big catalyst was the fall of 2016, when it was a transition year for politics, and there was a lot of legislation that was coming down the pipeline that was threatening our public land system. And to be completely honest, like, I really had no idea. I was uneducated myself about how all of that worked, all the finances and everything, and how potentially easily that could all disappear. And so there was this moment, like, when I started to learn about all this stuff, that it just it was like getting punched in the gut. I just felt like I needed to do my part to speak up and talk about it. At least, I have a very small platform, but at least do something that would maybe help a few other people learn about it and speak up about it. And it just knew that collectively, like the hunting industry as a whole, and there's a lot of people out there who have been doing this for decades, but just, the more people that knew about it, the more people that would speak up would help protect public lands and conservation going forward. And so, yeah, it was that fall of 2016. I just got all inspired and fired up, and I was coming off of a really good year on photography and videography, and just was kind of looking for that next big project. And this one was a combination of perfect timing and inspiration all at once.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds a lot like what I went through leading up to my book project. Same kind of deal, where I realized like, wow, this stuff is not as guaranteed as I thought. And I have so much to learn. Like, what can I do to help? And it sent us both down that path, I guess. But I mean, when people look at what you've done in those years since, there's been a lot. How would you describe like what that journey looked like for you? I mean, tell us about the public land bus and the van and everything since. Like, what have been the standout moments for you now that you've taken this detour from just hunting, photography, and videography to now, content producer, conservationist? There's your name. You're a content producer, conservationist.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. So, of course, got all fired up and, wanted to raise awareness about all these issues. And, the most obvious solution to that is to purchase a school bus. Obviously. And yeah, I mean, makes total sense. And actually the school bus idea had been around for a while. I was previous to my photography career, I had worked with my brother in his backcountry hunting store, and he had kicked around the idea of getting a bus and using it as like a marketing vehicle for their company or a mobile archery shop or, some different ideas. And so the school bus itself had kind of been floating around my brain and like all the possibilities of what you could do with that type of vehicle. But it wasn't until this idea for this project came about that I was like, oh, that's it. That's what you use a bus for. It's a rolling billboard to raise awareness. Like, what vehicle would get more attention than something that, basically every person in the country has ridden on a school bus at one point in time, like whether it be going to school or going to events or all these things. Like, it has all this nostalgia built into this vehicle. And so I was off and running. I was looking for buses on Craigslist and Facebook and, like newspaper ads, anywhere I could look. And my brother Josh found one on Craigslist out in Colorado, and I called on it and just, offered, as a bit of a barterer. So I was trying to trade gear for it and asked if the guy hunted and fished. And I was like, well, what do you need? Do you need coolers? Do you need guns? Do you need what are you looking for? And I think I finally just wore him down, and he had it listed for $5,500. And just was finally like, I'll take $3,500 cash. And so nice. So I said, yep, that sounds good. Drove down, or was out in Colorado for New Year's, and drove down on New Year's Eve 2016 and bought the bus. And then proceeded to basically plan the interior build and from there on out. But bought the bus New Year's, and then obviously in my photography career, I would go to Archery Trade Association show, the ATA show, and the SHOT Show. And every year I would go talk to my former clients and talk to potential new clients. And I went to both of those shows with all just jacked up that I had just, bought this 37-foot piece of steel and was like, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's the idea. Here's what I'm going to do with it. All of these companies were all fired up about it. And then not a single one of them came through on actual support for the bus project. So which I think in the end was even better, because year one I just spent every dime I had basically ever made and put it into this bus idea, and it started to get some traction towards the end of that first year. So had the school bus, ripped the whole interior out of it, all the seats, pulled the flooring up. And then Memorial Day weekend of 2017 was the very first actual thing that I did on the bus, which was a buddy and I painted the ceiling inside, and then I laid the floor in the bus. And so I just got to work and my parents had graciously allowed me to park the bus at their little lake cabin for the summer and sleep at the lake and wake up in the morning and make a pot of coffee and start working on the bus every day. So for, a little over 2 months, I would wake up, make a pot of coffee, walk out to the big yellow school bus in the driveway and just start working on stuff. And I just, it was whatever, start working at 7 a.m. and work till dark and then do it over again. And so from Memorial Day weekend until August, I believe it was August 7th was the day I hit the road. I transformed it from just your standard yellow school bus into what it is today, which is kind of a makeshift. I mean, it's a camper, but like without all of the like no running water, no toilet, just like bunk beds, bed storage, little kitchen area, and just a big giant green and white bus that says public land bus on the side.
Yeah, I can attest from when I saw it a handful of years ago that it definitely turned out really cool. I mean, it's every nomad hunter's dream of a mobile office home hunting camp. It turned out pretty sweet. What did you do from there? From like it's one thing to transform a bus. It's another thing to use that as a tool to get attention on public lands and advocacy for them. So how did you go about figuring out how to do that?
Yeah,
that seems like the trickier one almost.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously through my social channels, just continued to kind of like preach that message. But one of the connections that I made at, I believe it was at ATA show, a friend of mine introduced me to an editor at Outdoor Life. And then he introduced me to Andrew McKean, who was also at Outdoor Life. And McKean and I started talking back and forth about the project. And, he was working on getting sponsors for it and stuff, and that just didn't really work. And I was like, well, I'm doing this project regardless. And so we put together a deal where created 4 videos for this public land bus project. And to be totally honest, like by the end of the first year, like I really wasn't getting the end of that first fall that I had the bus. It like, it was cool and people liked it. And, it was kind of this whatever fun rig or whatever, but I was almost ready to be done with, driving a school bus around the country. And then all of the videos and articles and everything for Outdoor Life hit. And that's when it really picked up the pace and like just the number of, just the amount of traction, for lack of a better terms, that project got and kind of like escalated and pushed it to the forefront. And like this bus has become a symbol for public lands. It led to all sorts of other projects, including a whole series for OnX Maps, and a bunch of my former clients who were excited about it and didn't come through, like jumped on board and wanted to be part of it and wanted to push it and wanted to help about it and wanted to talk about it. And so, this initial project turned it, my original goal was to have the bus for a year, and that ended up turning into about 3 years. And, a lot of time spent in the school bus driving around the country, but it just took it just took Andrew McKean believing in this whole idea and helping push it out there for me to spread the word.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I know you've talked about bus life and all those trips and the different things you've done since, on a lot of different podcasts and different places. So I know you don't want to belabor that too much, but if you look back on those years from this vantage point, like what was the biggest takeaway for you just on like the adventure side or the bus life side? Like what stands out now today as either something that you love the memory or you hate the memory of, or that you would tell people to think about if they ever consider something crazy like this? What would that be?
I think like looking back at it all now, it's some of the best years that I've had in my short life. And, I definitely do not regret doing it at all. I think the biggest shift in my own brain that I had to make was the time and just the time it took to get from A to B. And then just the time that it took to like kind of let this whole thing organically grow. And so my brother put it a good way. He's like, just remember when you're driving that thing, like it's more like sailing. Like you're not going to get anywhere fast. You're just kind of letting the world pass you by. Like you're not really passing the world. Like you're just kind of out there cruising, doing this thing. And I think just through the course of like, many, many road trips in the bus and just getting, like really soaking in each and every one of these experiences, it taught me to kind of slow down. And, everything in our life is so fast paced. I think the bus taught me to slow down and just really see what was going around me, more so than even now, like I'll admit that I'm guilty of, getting lost in my phone or whatever it might be. The time that I was focused on this project definitely helped me, just see the world around me a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that for sure. So what happened from there? You moved on from the public land bus eventually to the public land van.
Yes.
Yep. And what's that next step?
Yeah. So that was pretty exciting because Josh and I have always been in the hunting together, and he owned the store and I was doing all the content stuff, and the transitioning from the bus to the van was an opportunity for us to do more stuff together. And so not only is it going from a full size bus to a van, like you can drive a lot more places, but you can get there quicker. It's a little quieter. There's a lot of positives to going from a 40-foot vehicle down to a 21-foot vehicle that has 4-wheel drive. But it was kind of a way to continue the mission and continue the idea and behind creating awareness around public lands and all things conservation. And it gave us, Josh and I, the opportunity to have this project together and build out kind of the ultimate hunting van, for lack of a better term. So it was since we've been, grew up in this whole thing together, it was kind of a cool way to bring our paths back to the same road and build the van together. And then, Josh and I have been owners of Public Land Tees together since its inception when the bus project launched. And so to have him kind of come on full time and do this all together has been pretty cool. So the van is, same color scheme, a lot of the same elements that came from the bus. We brought over into the van, the pine and the, some tin and some different stuff that we used in the bus to kind of like continue that message and create that awareness around all of the things that we're trying to educate people on.
Yeah. So on that education front, like what have the other things been, what are some of the highlights of what you guys have been pushing over these years? Both, I know you started with a lot around simply public lands, and that was during the land transfer movement and everything. Since then, as things have evolved, I know you've talked about other things. You've talked about duck stamps a lot, and more. What are some of the highlights there since?
Yeah. So when we started the company, obviously you're right. It was very surrounding that the land transfer legislation and all that type of stuff. But as we've evolved, I think the most fun that we've had is creating some of these initiatives that leverage systems that are already in place to kind of bring awareness to, like you said, like the duck stamp. We started the Stamp It Forward project, which is a way to basically raise a whole pile of money to purchase federal duck stamps, which by law, 98% of that money has to go towards habitat conservation, wetland purchase, extension of the national refuge system. And like that has been a very cool project. And then, I don't know if you want me to talk about our most recent initiative right now, but we just continue to try to find new and creative ways in the conservation space to raise money to give back to all these organizations that fight to improve habitat, improve access, and protect hunting heritage every single day.
Yeah. You've been doing a really good job of it too. I mean, it has been really fun to watch from afar and see what you're doing and see the real impact you're having. And that's the funny thing. I think when you get involved in this kind of stuff, it's easy to think so often like, oh, what can I do? These problems seem so big and so above me. And so, it's something that you watch on TV or you read about in the news. But I think for a lot of us, myself included at times, you can feel like, geez, like, what can little old I do? And what's that been? I mean, what's this period been like for you now that you've seen what you have been able to do? I mean, what have you learned about yourself or the I don't know, conservation as a calling or as the hunting community? I don't know what on that front stands out to you.
Yeah, I think that's been the biggest thing. One of the biggest things I've learned is how much impact each individual person can have. So like our company, Public Land Tees, $5 from every single item we sell, which is in the purchase price, $5 from every item we sell is donated back to different conservation organizations or projects. And, so we couldn't do anything that we do without our customer base. So like the real hero of this whole story is people that have been following this journey and have chosen to support us like through the purchase of merchandise, which then we turn and take that money and we donate it back into different causes, different projects, different organizations that need this critical funding to do all these things. But when we first started this whole thing, like I was totally overwhelmed, like really didn't know much about like how the system all worked. I was learning like as I went, really felt like I was like, man, are we actually going to be able to do anything? Like, are there enough people that care about this stuff? Is there enough, like, do I have a big enough platform to even like change anything? And that's been the coolest thing to watch is the people that have been following along with everything that we're up to, the people that have chosen to donate, support, jump in, share all this stuff. Like it only takes a few people to kind of get the ball rolling. And as that ball grows, as that snowball just keeps moving and growing and growing and more people are sharing it and talking about it and whatever, it blows me away every single day to watch this collective community make a difference time and time again, whether it be, raising money for a specific project or simply picking up the phone and calling or emailing about, in favor of or against a specific bill. People just educating themselves on, or receiving whatever, a newsletter or whatever it is from these organizations, all these different things, and people like jumping on board individually and watching that snowball into this massive wave of impact as we go forward. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen the sportsmen and women of this country rally together around issues and really cause massive change in a hurry.
Yeah, man, it's been a heck of a 5-6 year period now where we've been seeing some strong examples like that have been really cool to watch and to be a part of. And like you said, it's that snowball effect is kind of crazy when you realize it's happening and you step in like, whoa, there's a movement here. There's some fire here. And when that happens, good things tend to follow. So I think that's a perfect segue to the larger reason why I thought you'd be the perfect guy to talk to here, because it's this whole idea of like, what can you do that I wanted to talk about today? Because, this is week 4 of what I was calling Conservation Month here on the Wired Hunt podcast. It's the spring, there's not a whole lot of crazy stuff going on in the whitetail world. It's a great time to step back and think about, how do we ensure that the resources, the places, the critters that we care about so much are around into the future so that we can still hunt, so that we can share this with our kids or grandkids someday. And we've talked public lands, we've talked private lands, we've talked policy and legislation and all these different ideas and concepts and debates. But through a lot of this stuff, and you talked about it and I've felt it too, like you can so many times feel like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, that's a bad thing, or that's a good thing. I'd love to see that move forward, but what in the world can I do today? Or what can I actually do here in Michigan or Montana or Maine or wherever it is? So my idea, if you're game for this, Sam, is for us to lay out 10 specific ways, 10 specific actions that folks could take, today or over the next few weeks or this year that could actually make a positive difference for conservation. And this could be private land, it could be public land, it could be a lot of different things. So I've got a handful of ideas. Do you have a handful that we could run through and see if we can come up with 10 real solid actionable takeaways today?
Yeah, I think I'm totally game for that.
All right. Do you want to I was thinking maybe we just pitch one out, talk about it, and then go back and forth. Do you want to lead the way? Do you have a good opener for us?
Well, yeah,
pressure's on here, because if it's a bad one, then
I think I do, because obviously this one is what I've been focusing all my efforts on for the better part of like 3 or 4 months now. So if people are looking at getting involved in conservation, like hands down, the easiest way to do it is to join an organization. And you can stop me anytime, but you can join an organization. And one of our latest initiative is a way for people to get involved on a bigger level. So obviously, one, go out and join any organization, find a species you're passionate about. I can almost guarantee there's a conservation group that is dedicated to protecting that species. But our initiative that we just came out with a few weeks ago now is the Conservation Crossing Initiative. And it allows people to go to our website, buy a single T-shirt, and automatically be enrolled in an annual membership for 5 organizations, which include Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Delta Waterfowl, National Wild Turkey Federation, the Mule Deer Foundation, and Pheasants Forever, all at one time. It's $125. So, but yeah.
So I love it. I love the idea. I'm looking forward to getting my T-shirt here in the mail sometime soon. I finally signed up and got in on it. This is an obvious one, right? But it's also one that probably a lot of people pay lip service to more than they actually do. I mean, I've been guilty of that at times. I've always been a member of a couple, but there's so many great organizations out there that it's easy to forget this one or that one, and easy to forget how important it is for people to be doing that and sending in their money. I mean, as you've gone through this project yourself, what have you learned about the importance of people just getting signed up and how much that helps these organizations?
Yeah, I think the cool part is understanding that when you become a member of one of these organizations, so typical annual membership to a conservation group is $35. So, but that $35, it goes a whole lot further than just getting you those member benefits, which every single group has, whether it be their, a magazine 5 or 6 times a year, or, you get the membership card and a decal. And a lot of times there's discounts to their partners and that type of stuff. But what these organizations are able to do is, because they're so membership based, let's say, let's take the National Wild Turkey Federation. It's spring turkey season. So if you join the National Wild Turkey Federation, whether it be an individual, membership or through our Conservation Crossing program, NWTF can leverage those funds to work with partners or grants and all of these things to basically take that $25 or $35 donation and triple it, quadruple it, or 5x it based on people matching donations. So, the more members that each group has, the more money overall they can raise, because they have these partners that are like, okay, if you get, 100,000 members, we'll match up to X number of dollars for, to add to the pot. And so I think that's been kind of the biggest eye opener to me, is like that $35 or that $125 through Conservation Crossing, like it goes so much further than that initial investment.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And, from a benefit standpoint for like the individual, maybe the biggest thing I found is the magazines are nice and it's great to donate that money and help from a financial perspective. But what I've found might be the biggest benefit with this membership is just like the pipeline of information and opportunities that comes from joining one of these groups. So whenever I hear folks wondering or emailing me or messaging me like, hey, how can I get involved? How can I do something? This is always the first thing I mention too, because by doing this one action, becoming a member, you do what you just described. You financially, benefit these groups in a big way, and they can then use those dollars and have exponential impacts. But then you get all this information that is so important in actually being able to do anything. Like if you don't know the issues, if you don't know about this action or this, opportunity or this piece of property that's threatened, like if you can't be aware of those things, you can't do anything about it. And it's so hard to keep track of all this stuff. Like any one of us is so busy in our everyday lives. Like how in the world Can I keep track of every important issue when it comes to deer or pheasants or public lands or the rivers that I care about or trout or turkeys or whatever it is? I mean, it's impossible to scan the web every day, all day and read all those things and stay up on it. And so these organizations, they do that for you, right? I mean, BHA is a great example in that they're sending out their newsletters, giving you information, or they're sharing stuff on social media, or they have action alerts to get you going on specific things. And many of these organizations do the same thing. It's just a pipeline for all these other things, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then I think in addition to that, you get all of this information that you can act on. But the other thing that it does is, regardless of which organization you join, it immediately connects you to the local community, because there's always a local chapter of whatever national chapter you're joining. So let's say, if it's BHA, they'll send you an email with, you could, here's the local chapter, here's the events that they have in your area, here's the people that are involved with that. And so anybody that joins one of these organizations is immediately connected to like-minded people that live near them. So, maybe you don't go hunting together, or maybe you don't, share your honey hole spots or whatever, but it does put you in touch with people that you could go do a river cleanup day, or you could go volunteer together and pull fence out and, on some mule deer project, or you could, go grab a beer together and talk about hunting tactics, or, you name it. There's a million things that happen once you get plugged into that community that surrounds all of these different groups too.
Yeah, so true. And man, for new hunters, this is another one I get all the time. I'm a new hunter and I want to meet, other people that do this kind of stuff, because no one in my family or friends does, or I need a mentor, or I just want to be around like-minded people and I'm new in town or something. Like right here, join one of these groups, connect with the local chapter or branch, and bam, just like that, you're in. Right. You've got an opportunity for mentorship. You've got an opportunity for new buddies that, maybe you do get a beer, or you go hunting or fishing together. Maybe you do actually have ways now to do some work on the ground. It's kind of like the silver bullet for this kind of stuff. That it's like the gateway that gets you into so many different things. I mean, right there, if you're not a member of, a handful of these, do it. It's such an easy way to get started, and so many of the good things come from it. Why was it these 5 organizations that are part of the Conservation Crossing? Any particular reason, or is it just that they were the ones willing to do this? What's the story there?
No, we definitely picked them out intentionally, and it was a way to kind of cover the masses, right? So like not only species wise, but country wise. So you have the Mule Deer Foundation, and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is primarily focused on a lot of Western type stuff. Even though there's local chapters nationwide, there's still out of Montana. So you have you have an advocacy, public land and water group, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. So you kind of cover that Western, Western focus, as well as the mule deer, which is, a Western big game animal, an aspirational hunt for a lot of people that are in the East. And then you have National Wild Turkey Federation, which I did the research last spring, and second to the white-tailed deer, turkeys are the second most pursued species of game. So you have, literally millions of people that turkey hunt. And so it only made sense to reach out to the NWTF, as they are the, foremost organization when it comes to turkey hunting heritage, turkey habitat restoration, all of those things. You have Pheasants Forever, which we've collaborated with in the past and worked on their Build a Wildlife Area campaigns. They do a lot of amazing habitat work, and they have a really unique model when it comes to their conservation group, where the local chapters they get to choose where 100% of the locally raised funds go for projects. And so they have thousands and thousands of volunteers. And so we cover that upland side of things, which, not only helps upland bird species, but every other species, because most of what Pheasants Forever is doing on these landscapes is planting more grass, working on riparian areas, adding water sources, which not only, of course, is going to help upland game species, but everything else. And then Delta Waterfowl, and we've collaborated with Delta Waterfowl in the past as well. But I mean, you can't have this massive collaboration without a organization that's focused on a migrating species. So we really tried to kind of spread it out and cover as much ground and as much different influence as possible to really highlight like how important each group is individually, but more so like kind of that old analogy that, a high tide raises all ships type of thing, that if you can kind of spread that wealth out and collaborate together, like it's going to help every single person, every single species across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Another thing I kind of noticed, and I don't know if this was by design or not, but, when you look at something like mule deer or pheasants, or even turkeys, for a handful of years now, I've been hearing rumblings about turkey populations declining in different parts of the country and some issues there. Mule deer especially, but pheasants with CRP declining in a lot of states and all the different things pressuring mule deer. Like, these are some species that need some extra love right now too, and sometimes don't get as much attention as, white-tailed deer soak up a lot of attention in the room. So I love the fact that by looping in some of these other groups, it's given the love where there's a little bit extra needed, and it makes it easy. Sometimes it's what do they call it? The opt-in effect or the opt-out effect. Like, if you were to, send someone, an email in which they are automatically, if the button is already pressed, like to opt into becoming a member of something or to sign up for a newsletter, you'll get way more people to sign up for that newsletter than if you sent them that same thing, but the button for it says, you have to actually select the button to opt in versus select the button to opt out. Like, if you make it a default choice, it just becomes easier for folks just to go along with it. And so in this case, you made it really easy for people to go along with something that's good. That's good. And that is, if you had instead said, hey, pick however many conservation groups you want to join with the purchase of this shirt, and make it a lot more challenging for people and make it a little bit more inconvenient. And people probably wouldn't sign up for, some of these other species maybe that they don't chase every day or don't have experience with. So it was just a smart, well put together idea. And I love that it's happening. And, I'd say go out there, get the shirt, become a member, and then tack on some other memberships too. There's so many great organizations out there. The National Deer Association, of course, is a great one. There's plenty of good places to send your time and attention and funding, as available. So I love it. It's a great one to start with, Sam.
Yeah, awesome.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver, off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild. But searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
So I think that the one I would pitch next is a very clear kind of next step from what you just suggested. You know, you said join the organization, and I'm going to say do the next step after you join the organization, which is something you mentioned a little bit, which is volunteering. So this year, 2021, I'd encourage everyone, if you haven't before, volunteer for your first on-the-ground conservation project. And this is something that is, you know, a lot easier to do if you're involved with one of these groups, because I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier. It's the knowing. Excuse me. had one too many lunchtime bubbly drinks, I guess. What I'm trying to say here is knowing when those opportunities come up. Like, where can I volunteer? When can I volunteer? That's the hard part. A lot of people want to do something, but knowing like, okay, this Saturday there's a thing within an hour of me, I can go do it. That's the trick. So when you sign up, get a hold of a local branch or chapter or regional director or whoever it is, and just let them know that, hey, I'm a member now. I'd love to know about volunteer opportunities. I think that's the easiest way, because it's hard to otherwise track these things down. So just send out a note saying, hey, I'd like to do something. And you're going to be amazed, I think, by how many opportunities there are to do it. I can tell you that I reached out to our National Deer Association regional director, or he used to be called a regional director. He's got some other fancy title now about grassroots or something. His name's Josh Hilliard. You might know him. And I asked him, like, hey, what kind of things are available here in our home state right now? And he sent me a whole list of different opportunities for people in Michigan. And I'm sure there's something similar in all sorts of different states. So, for example, on May 15th, there's a big river cleanup being put on by Michigan's chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. There's going to be volunteer opportunities at the Back 40 property here in Michigan put on by the National Deer Association. Of course, everyone listening to this knows all about the Back 40. There's an organization called the MUCC, Michigan United Conservation. I'm blanking on my acronyms here, but they've got this on the ground and on the water volunteer programs where they've got, dozens of different habitat projects like this, where you can go out and, help plant something or help put trees in or help burn or help do different things on the ground to actually make a difference. So this is one of those things that I think ties into what you said too, Sam, the whole connecting with people thing. Because if you go out and do one of these volunteer opportunities, there's another great opportunity to meet folks, to get tapped into the community, and who knows where that leads. So that's my second action is this year, try to actually go do one of those on the ground projects. If we all do that, there's a whole lot of good stuff happening out there. And I guess, if you don't want to do that, or if for some reason your schedule's crazy and you just can't commit to someone else's, calendar, plan a day on a property you hunt to go pick up trash or something like that. Like one on the ground thing, I think is a really great goal for all of us at a minimum this year. That would be my first suggestion.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And I've spent so much time kind of doing like these big, huge projects raising awareness that I haven't done as much like volunteer boots on the ground work as I want. So like going forward, that's definitely going to be high on my priority list of like really getting into these things and, showing how awesome it is just to go out there and do these boots on the ground activities. But yeah, I like that one a lot. Yeah.
What do you got next?
So I touched on it a little bit earlier, and you said that I talk a lot about duck stamps, and so I think that's a way I want to talk about the duck stamp and how that's a no-brainer for anybody who is looking to be involved at a very simple level. So for anybody that doesn't know what the federal duck stamp is, it is if you waterfowl hunt, by law you have to purchase a federal duck stamp. And the cool thing about that is it was started in 1934. It's the Federal Migratory Bird Act. And by law, 98% of the purchase price of a federal duck stamp has to be allocated to improving or purchasing more wetlands, which obviously helps with migratory bird species, but also helps with soil erosion, water quality, flooding, and helps roughly 700 species overall, like through just improving or maintaining current wetlands or adding more wetlands. So the cool thing about the duck stamp though is it's $25. I think my favorite thing about it is you don't have to be a member of something. You don't have to have a hunter safety card. You don't have to have a license before you buy it. There is the barrier to entry to purchasing this and knowing that almost 100% of the money you just spent is going to conservation is amazing. Like there's really there's no other like system put in place that much money is designated to conservation. So it's just a very simple way for people that are looking for a way to get involved in conservation to know that they did a major thing simply by either going to the post office and buy a duck stamp or hopping on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website and buying one online. The barrier to entry, the hurdles that you have to cross are so low to take that step. I think it's one of my favorite programs that we talk a lot about.
Yeah. And even if you said it, even if you don't duck hunt, it's still something you can and is worth doing, right?
Yeah, I think especially if you don't duck hunt. I mean, if you're a waterfowl hunter, you have to buy one. So it's something that, like you don't really think about it. You're like, oh, it's just part of my tag. But if you're not a waterfowl hunter, it's just as important, if not more important, to purchase it. Because if we could get like collectively anybody who goes and hunts anything to buy a duck stamp every year, like the funding for these massive tracts of wetlands, like the funding would not be a problem, and there would be more waterfowl and more birds and more animals than we would know what to do with.
Yeah. It's such a good idea. I wonder why there isn't something like this for other projects, other species, like why isn't there a public land stamp? Wouldn't that be a cool idea?
It's super cool. Yeah. I think what it comes down to is people that hunt or fish, I think they feel they don't see it as an investment in the future. I think we have done it like feels like a tax, it feels like a tax on this activity that we all do. And I think that's just poor the system doing a bad job on educating people about how important all of these things are. So it's the same reason that every time license prices and everything go up, it's, you hear a lot of griping about that, but every time I buy a hunting or fishing license, I just look at it as a concert ticket to the greatest show that I get to attend every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's spot on. And like, there's a lot of taxes we can gripe about and we want to, and that's fair. I mean, I get it. I've done it. I'm there. But if there's anything I'm going to pay extra for, like if there's anything in the world I'd be happy to pay a little extra for, it's this stuff. I mean, anyone who's listening to this has a love for the outdoors and hunting and wild things. And I mean, I don't know. You can't put a price tag on that stuff as far as I'm concerned. I'll whatever I've got to do to pony up to keep this stuff around and accessible and healthy. I mean, gosh, I'd much rather spend my money on that than an Xbox or a new TV or whatever, bunch of beer. I mean, this is money well spent. As much as I like beer.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So what else? Let's see. What would be another good one? So here's one. And this is much more of a commitment. The first couple of things we've talked here are pretty easy to tackle for anyone out there. It's a low lift. I mean, I think everyone could go and do those first three things today. My next suggestion is going to be one that is applicable to a much smaller portion of folks listening, and was going to take a lot more thought. It's going to take some serious planning and some legal work and thinking. So take this with a grain of salt. But something that we've talked about over the last few weeks has just been this endless cycle of development. Right? I mean, every year, more and more wild places and open spaces are paved over, they're subdivided and built up, they disappear. I'm sure, Sam, there's places from your childhood that like you can remember playing in or exploring that now are a Walmart or a housing development or who knows what, right? I mean, it's just happening. There's actually a new feature that Google Earth just put out last week, which allows you to go back almost 30 years. You can do like a time lapse feature of, I think, anywhere in America and anywhere in the world, I think. And you can see how the aerial photography, you can look at the aerial photography of a place and see how it changes over the last 30 years. And if you go and look at your favorite hunting spot, or look at some place that you care about, or look at anywhere randomly in America, if you zoom back to what it looked like in 1978 or whatever that first date is, and then you start fast forwarding through time, I can tell you what you're going to see. You're going to see more buildings, more roads, more pavement, and less green, less and less grasslands and forests and water and rivers and wetlands and all that good stuff that we care about. Like, that's just the reality of what's happening. So I think that one of the big things that we as hunters and anglers and outdoors people can do is try to be one of those positive forces to slow that tide. There's a bunch of ways we can do it. But one that has been discussed a little bit over these last couple weeks is this idea of a conservation easement. And so a conservation easement, if you missed those earlier episodes, there's a bunch of different ways this can happen, a bunch of different programs you can go through. But basically, these are voluntary programs in which if you own land, if you've got a hunting camp or a back 40 of your own, or whatever, if you own land, you can voluntarily sell the development rights to that property so that in the future it can't be developed. Basically, you are saying, like, hey, this is a place that's really special to me, and I want to make sure that after I'm dead and gone, it's not going to be turned into a shopping mall. I want to make sure that after I'm dead and gone, this is still wild. There's still deer out here. There's still pheasants out here, or whatever it is. I want to keep it, this wild, special place that's been so important to me and my kids and whatever it is in your situation. So these programs allow you to enter a legal contract in which you maintain ownership of the property, you maintain all your same old rights to do what you want to do there. It's not like you're giving free access to the property or anything. It's just basically saying, like, hey, we're putting this regulation on this property that into perpetuity, there will be no development of this property. There will be no subdivision of this property. There will not be any kind of impacts to this that would remove the natural qualities of the property. And there's all sorts of different little caveats you can throw in there. You can say, I want to keep this 10 acres available to still build or add onto my house or build a cabin or whatever. Like, you can set all these things ahead of time. But what it allows you to do is to make sure that the next people, 50 years from now, maybe, you don't know if they're going to care about conservation. You don't know if they're going to care about the whitetails or the ducks or whatever. But you, since you own this place right now, you have this special opportunity to put your lasting kind of fingerprints on that wild space. And so you can do this through some government programs. You can do this through some private land conservation trusts. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Sometimes you can be compensated and paid for this. They'll actually buy the rights. They'll buy this conservation easement. You can also do this as a donation. Like, for example, Ducks Unlimited has a conservation easement program where you can donate the conservation easement to DU, and then they kind of manage the monitoring of it and some of the logistics of it. And it's just a really cool way to make sure that your special place stays special and conserved into the future. I'm not saying this is for everyone. I understand there's like a lot of logistics that have to go around this. But if you own land, my encouragement would be for you to look into it. Do a little Googling, read up on the conservation easement programs available where your property is. This is something that I'm going to start looking into and seeing if this is a good fit maybe for our family camp. And I mean, there's a lot to it, but I'm just going to pitch you on learn more, do some reading, do some Googling, see if this is a good fit, because I think it's a great way that us as hunters that have a lot of land. I mean, the number that I keep on bringing up is something like 350 some million acres across the country are either owned or leased or managed for hunting. 350 million plus acres of land are kind of underneath our influence of sorts. So that's a big footprint that we could have a lasting impact on. So there's my pitch. Consider a conservation easement. And I think it's I just think it's one of those special kinds of ways we can make a long-term impact that takes a little time, but could last a long time. What do you think about that one, Sam?
I think that's awesome. It's always been a dream of mine to have a piece of property at some point. And I think, if I ever actually make it happen and be able to go down that road, I think the conservation easement thing is something I'll definitely look into, to protect it for the future. And like you said, like I would have, set it up in a way where, if I pass it on to my kids or their kids or however it works down the road, like make it so it's still available for them to, have areas where they can build a new cabin or whatever it might be. But protect it in perpetuity so it's always going to be a wild place. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, talk about the worst nightmare. Can you imagine being like, you have someplace that you've loved and stewarded and worked on and spent all this time building up, and then you pass away. And if you were watching it from the grave, when I think about it myself, I think about our family hunting camp up in northern Michigan. We call it Kenroven. It's the 40 acres that like formed me. It is foundational to who I am. And the idea of 50 years from now, someone coming in there, and who knows what the world's going to look like in 50 years, but what if there was a big city kind of slowly easing its way towards there, and all of a sudden someday they decide, we're going to chop this all up into 1 acre lots and put houses there. I mean, I would be rolling over in my grave for 2,000 years if that were to happen. So, so this is just a great way to make sure something like that doesn't. So there's my idea. What's next for you, Sam?
Let's see. I'm going to go back to something that's not quite so heavy lifting, like you said. But this one is just go. I'm sure you've talked about this before, but just go shopping. And it's going to sound weird, but more specifically,
I'm in for it.
More specifically, if we're talking, stimulus, all this stuff, get the economy going. But more specifically, go shopping for guns, ammo if you can find it, archery equipment, fishing gear, anything with it kind of held in that space. And I'm sure you've talked about this before on the podcast, but anytime you buy a gun, you buy ammo, you buy a bow, you buy arrows, all of those things have a federal excise tax on them, which goes into the Pittman-Robertson Fund. And it's somewhere between 10 and 11%, depending on what the item is. And that is taxed at the manufacturer level. So, obviously that cost is just passed down to the consumer, but it's a self-inflicted tax from way back that goes into a fund. And then those funds can be applied for by state agencies, organizations, all of these people that are working on habitat, access, easements, all of these different things. And every time you go out and purchase one of these things, that money goes in there, and then that money gets funneled to these projects to help improve habitat management, wildlife management, hunting heritage, all across the country. So that's a pretty easy one. Most people that are listening to this probably like purchasing new guns, new bows, ammo, all that stuff. And you can rest a little easier knowing that, a chunk of that is going to protect the places and give back to the places that you want to protect.
Yeah. This is what I call the significant other silver bullet. So you can say, you can tell your wife or whatever that, hey, you know what? I had to buy that new gun because I care about conservation, and this is a way to do that. Right there. It's all about the story. And this gives you a great story because it is a really great program. And Pittman-Robertson, it's another example of how, we hunters have kind of agreed to self-taxation of a sort. Back in the 40s when this stuff was all coming around, 30s and 40s, it was folks at that time being willing to say, all right, we'll get behind a piece of legislation like this because we care about this stuff and we're willing to pay a little extra. And man, I'm glad that folks were willing to do it back then because it's paying for the lion's share of a lot of this management work that needs to be done. These programs on the ground, a lot of that comes from these PR dollars. So yeah. Pat yourself on the back, sleep easy, feel good about it. And I guess if you're out there doing that, if you're shopping someplace that allows you to round up for conservation, which a lot of companies are doing these days, a lot of stores are doing, go ahead and do that too. That's another one, right?
Yep. That is another one. So perfect.
I like it. I'm going shopping. All right, here's another one, and this one's going to be easy to do. Take a little bit of time just to think about it, but this is related to that same idea of how we're losing wild places, right? And this is related to one of the ideas that we talked about with Randy a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this with Whit Fosberg last week. And this is the 30 by 30 initiative. Sam, have you heard anything about that? Read anything about 30 by 30? You familiar with that?
I am a little bit. I haven't done the deep dive into it because it's so fresh.
Yep. So anyone who's listened to those other episodes already knows the basic gist, so I don't want to preach about too much. But basically, it's this top-level goal that kind of started internationally within the scientific community and has been picked up now in America by a variety of different conservationists, environmental and conservation organizations, and now some politicians, basically pitching that to prevent, the series of extinctions and declining wildlife populations that we've been seeing and that are absolutely happening across the world and even here in America, to prevent that from getting worse, we need to set a goal of conserving 30% of our land and water by 2030. So it's setting like a big audacious goal and something to work towards. And so as you guys have heard me talk about, I'm really excited about kind of the opportunity this presents folks like us and the conservation community to get on the offensive. So much of the time, Sam, like with the whole land transfer movement and all that 5 years ago, it was defense. Like these guys are trying to come and take away our land. They're trying to sell these places or transfer them and denude them and deteriorate them. So we got to play defense. This is the opposite. This is like, hey, you know what? We stopped that. Now let's go out and make sure that more places have some form of conservation or protection on them to make sure that we don't lose more. So who better to take a leadership position in this than us, than hunters? I would rather we should be in that conversation. The hunters and anglers should be part of this. I know there's some concern around, what if some folks within, different sides of the environmental movement have too much of a say on things and they're going to make it this and that and we're not going to like it, or they're not going to allow hunting, or they're not going to whatever. I mean, there's all sorts of things you could say. So let's just be a part of the conversation and make sure that those things don't happen. So my suggestion, my action item for people is to, number one, learn about this stuff some more. Go to huntfish3030.com. That's this website that's been put together that features basically a position statement from the hunting and fishing community that's been approved and signed off on by basically name any hunting or fishing conservation organization out there, and they're on this list. And this position statement basically says, hey, we see 30 by 30 as a great opportunity. We, the hunting and fishing community, have been leaders in the conservation space for decades, and we want to support this and see this as a great opportunity to protect more places. But we want to make sure our voice is heard. So let's make sure we're thinking about some important things like maintaining hunting and fishing access in these newly conserved or protected lands, making sure there's clear ways to define what counts as conserved or protected, and making sure things like private land conservation easements would be counted because, hey, there's a huge opportunity with those types of things. So my suggestion is, one, go to the website, huntfish3030.com, read up on this stuff. And then number two, email your two senators and say, hey, I want to make sure you know about 30 by 30, and I want to make sure you're listening to hunting and fishing position on it. And copy and paste some stuff out of that website, that position statement I'm talking about. Really easy. All you got to do is punch in your senators' names, copy in some information from that position statement, shoot it on out. I think this is one of those things that over the next 8-9 years could be one of these big success stories we're talking about. Just like you and I, Sam, can talk about the success that we had, as a community with the land transfer movement and the whole Chavez bill and how we shut that down and all the different good things that have come out of the public land awareness renaissance. Why don't we go on the offensive with that same energy and be able to look back, on the 2020s and say, man, over that 8-9 year period, look at all of the progress we made. Look at how we made sure that there's going to be more wild places around, that we're not going to lose all these spots that we care about, that your old fishing hole isn't going to disappear, that spot you learned to duck hunt isn't going to be gone, that patch of pines that I taught my son to turkey hunt is going to be here down the road. That stuff really gets me excited. And I think there's this momentum around this idea and this goal. Let's latch onto it and be a part of it versus just watching someone else steer it. That's my idea, Sam.
Yeah, no, I love that. And like you said, I mean, just go on the offensive. I mean, so so often our whole industry community is reactive and not planning for the future. I mean, they are to some extent, but again, it's mostly like something happens and we have to, the world's on fire. We have to react to it. So, I think that's great. So, like Mark said, go to that website, learn about that, and get involved.
Yep. I think it's going to be a really interesting thing to follow and be a part of. So stay tuned more on that. What do you got next?
So this one is something that is pretty easy to do, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And it's all of us are so involved these days on social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. There's a million different platforms or, blogs, podcasts, all of those things. I would encourage people to spend more time and effort posting about and talking about conservation issues. Now, I will warn you, when you post about these things, when you talk about these things, you will get about zero engagement. And
it's not as exciting as the big buck picture, huh?
No, it's not. It's not as exciting, but as the big buck picture, it's not sexy. Conservation is not a sexy thing. And so, I've seen it time and time again. The more I talk and preach about conservation, like the lower my engagement rate is. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to continue to do it. And I think that if we can get more people on board talking about it, whether it be a volunteer weekend that you went and participated in, or, something that you just donated to, or, you went to a banquet and you did this, or, helped raise money for this project, whatever it might be, talk about it. Tell your friends, tell your buddies, because you never know who you might inspire to also do something like that. So I think just posting about these things that you can do in a positive light, like you're going to be posting something anyway, maybe splashing a little bit of conservation. It's a pretty easy way for everyone to get involved and to kind of keep that message moving forward.
Yeah. Now you've done this more than most. Do you have any suggestions on, I don't know, like how to do it right? Like, I don't know, whether that be the medium that you use, like picture or video or written, or how you talk about this stuff or what you share? I don't know, anything you've learned about telling these stories, sharing these things online that's useful or helpful to doing it in a better way?
Yeah, I think the most important part is to just try not to be too preachy about it. Because the last thing, nobody likes just getting talked at. But maybe just talk about like your involvement in it. Like if you're posting about it, just be like, oh, I joined this organization and I went out and I, did a river cleanup over the weekend, and, like collectively we hauled out, 37 bags of trash or whatever, like anything like that. Just kind of always just post it in a positive light. I think that's probably the best way to do it without being like, oh, I did this, why aren't you, don't try to condemn anybody for not speaking up about it, I guess. That's probably the best way to go about it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's funny. There's this. It's present in a lot of different communities, but there's this kind of like social proof or social momentum kind of thing that happens with this type of deal, where if enough folks, like the public lands thing is a perfect example. Like during that whole period around the land transfer movement, so many people started talking about public land and public land access issues that it all of a sudden became like the thing. It became like, if you're not tapped in on this, if you don't realize what's going on, if you're not, doing your part, you're missing out. Like you're outside of the community now. If you weren't kind of involved in that, there's a certain, saying it's trendy is kind of negative, but I guess if being trendy could ever be good, I would say like making conservation trendy is a damn good place to do it. So if enough of us are talking about like, yeah, I'm doing stuff. Yeah, I did this. Yeah, I think this is an issue that I'm keeping tabs on. I think it's pretty interesting. If enough of us do that, the people that wouldn't normally get involved in these things will probably take notice. And all of a sudden when it becomes the quote unquote like thing to do, then you're talking about some real cool stuff happening.
Yeah. Well, it's the tipping point, right?
Yeah.
It's just like it's like the video of that one weird dude dancing at the concert. And, and if you haven't seen it, just go YouTube, weird dude dancing at a concert. But like, it starts out with just one person in the video. There's one person that's dancing just crazy. And then you have one other guy that decides to go, like, I'm just going to go, get wild too and just dance. And then all of a sudden you have a few more adopters and a few more adopters. And the next thing you know, there's hundreds of people that are just going nuts and joining in on all this stuff. So it takes a little while, but like you said, if you can get enough people talking about it, if you can get enough people thinking it's trendy to be a conservationist and preach about conservation and really, be passionate about it. Yeah, there's no end to what we can do as a community in that space.
Yeah. And social media definitely, for all of its downfalls, one thing that it has done that's pretty darn cool is it has made that kind of like community building or sharing just so much easier. I mean, you can mobilize a group of like-minded people in a crazy way compared to what it would have taken 20 years ago. So,
yeah,
if there was one, I mean, we've seen it a handful of times with big issues or big bills, like when there is a concerted thing that we're all going to double down on and you can get the word out there and enough people start doing it, that snowball effect can be massive. And we've got that power at our fingertips now. So that's pretty cool. So I love it. If ever one of us started doing that absolutely makes a big difference.
Yeah.
What
else you got?
Yeah, I'm wondering here, what do I have? All right, here's one. This is going to be another on the ground thing. My challenge for folks listening within the deer hunting community is to take action on one non-deer focused habitat project this year. We talked a lot about this 2 episodes ago with Adam Keith and Matt Dye. So there was tons of ideas mentioned in that one. My challenge, my hope is that every one of us that has a piece of ground that either we lease or we own it, and then we can do some kind of stuff. Let's all try to do one thing that's not solely deer focused. It's obvious that we always want to do those projects that are going to make the deer hunting better. For those of us that are nuts about whitetails, I'm guilty of it a ton. Like if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to put money and time and energy into it, of course I want it to lead to, a awesome encounter with a great big giant buck on November 1st. I've got that beautiful little green clover plot for that. Right. But, but we have these places, we have these landscapes that we have the privilege to either own or lease or to use. And, there's a lot of power that we have on those places to do good stuff for other critters out there. And unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff out there that is struggling compared to deer. Deer are doing pretty darn great across the landscape. We've done an awesome job as deer hunters and managers of managing them and providing, landscapes that they benefit from. But we've talked about this throughout the whole Back 40 project. Things like butterflies and bees are seriously struggling. Songbirds are declining rapidly across a lot of different places. Ruffed grouse are in a bad place across a lot of their landscape. There's all sorts of these other animals out there that could use some help, that could use more wildlife habitat, that, pheasants across a lot of the Midwest now are declining because of more and more fence rows getting tore out, more and more grasslands and CRP stuff being put into crops. There's so many examples of this kind of stuff. I'm sure you've seen it, Sam. So, if you can find one thing, it could be small, it could be just a test. It could be, maybe this year, instead of planting 5 food plots, I'm going to do 4 food plots. And one of those spots, that 1 acre that usually goes into straight clover, maybe now let's try to manage that as an old field and promote native plants and weeds and different things like that. That would be great for pollinators and butterflies and bees and rabbits and all that stuff. Maybe, instead of, instead of investing $1,000 or $500 in a new box blind, maybe you take $500 and get a cheap chainsaw and some safety gear and do some kind of timber management cut, a little DIY project on a half acre that brings some sunlight to the ground. Look at those ideas. There's tons of stuff out there. Try something. My idea is one non-deer project. See what it does on the landscape. It's probably going to end up helping your deer hunting too. But if we can do this and give some love to these other animals, these other landscapes, I think everything that's connected benefits. And I think that'd be a great place for us to spend a little time as deer hunters and managers. So that's my next one.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I like that a lot. And like you said, you might be focusing on something that is quote unquote not deer related, but it's almost guaranteed that it's going to help your deer herd as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Your turn.
Let's see here. I've got a little list. Now this one is going to take a little bit more people educating themselves on it, but this one is just vote for conservation. So much of what happens, you kind of touched on stuff like the Farm Bill and CRP and these major government programs. A lot of that happens in Washington. The decisions that, affect your local herd or your local flock or your local, like habitat improvement stuff it comes from Washington, and it comes from, being educated about who's running for what seats. And then, like kind of looking back on their track record or at least looking back at like what where they have positioned themselves, on conservation issues. And so it's just, whether it be researching the voting records or, asking those questions to different organizations that are keeping an eye on anybody that's, running for certain positions or whatever within the government, educate yourselves on, who's going to be pro habitat conservation, public lands, or conservation easements or private land improvement, and know who you should vote for in the election, because that makes a huge difference. Yeah. But that, it takes time. That one takes there's not one great, central location for all of that information. And unfortunately, a lot of the organizations can't really tell you, right or wrong, like who has voted for what, because they have a nonprofit status. And so they're not able to really, they can't have a political view because they're supposed to be unbiased and objective about everything. So it's, that one you got to take on for yourself and learn about who you're voting for and where they stand on all those issues. So it takes a little time, but believe me, it's worth it once you start to learn all that stuff.
Yeah. Now here's the rub though, Sam.
Yeah.
How do you personally go about figuring out the balance? Because, I think something that plagues a lot of our political situation a lot of these times is that it's hard to find candidates that are good on habitat and conservation and also good on hunting rights or firearm rights, things like that are important to what we do. I mean, this is a thing I'm constantly wrestling with. How do I do this right? How do I get the best of both worlds? It's like every year I'm constantly trying to figure this out and trying to read up on who's best on these different things and all that. I mean, how do you manage that? How do you think about that?
Oh, it's not easy. I think for me, what it boils down to is I have a list of priorities, for whether it be for my personal views and then the much grander view when it comes to all things conservation related. And I think it's just trying to pick and choose what's going to fit that bill as best as I can. I'm never going to get it right 100% of the time, but I do know that, for our country to continue to progress and do the right things, we need a balance of both sides of the aisle and people that are, maybe the best thing is trying to find people who are willing to work with each other and get them in office. And so, it's not all so one-sided one way or another, because I think, as a country as a whole, we have, people that lean really far one way and really far the other way. And there's a lot of us that are kind of in that more centrally minded, common sense stuff. So I think it's just picking and choosing as best you can on how all that fits into, both your personal and world views.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right there with you on that one. And that's so true. I wish we could get more of that middle ground represented, and get some working together happening. You know, I would add on that, which is like, vote for conservation, vote for these things you care about. But then I would say my yes, but, or yes, and would be, yes, do that. And after the elections, regardless of who won, then pressure the hell out of whoever did win to represent the thing that still matters to you. So, you know, if the person who's good on, I mean, again, this isn't always the case. Sometimes there's people that are good on all things that we care about. But let's just say hypothetically, like the person who's good on the environment, but not good on guns or good on hunting rights, say that person wins. In that case, I say, all right, let's get a hold of that person and say, yes, please on that environment stuff. And yes, please on that conservation public land stuff, and say, great job, attaboy, attagirl, whatever. But then really raise a ruckus about like, hey, but we still need this, and we have these really important hunting rights. You got to support that. You got to support that. You can't be good on conservation, but bad on this. So we got to, like, the onus is on us to keep making a racket on that thing. Or on the flip side, if the person that's great on our firearm rights or great on hunting, if they win, but then they want to start doing some wonky stuff with our public lands, or they start promoting some bad stuff for wildlife, then same thing. Like, hey, buddy, I voted for you, but you cannot wreck it by doing this bad stuff for the other things. That pressure, those emails and those calls, even after the election, I think that can still make a difference too. So be the squeaky wheel, vote, and then be the squeaky wheel.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Just hold all of those people accountable, and, you know, potentially even sway their mind to, you know, go down the path that we want them to go down, because they are, after all, elected officials elected by the people.
Yep. Yeah. It's possible. I mean, we've seen examples over the last 5 years of how we've been able to do it, right? Chavez, example A. So, there's definitely that power we have. That takes us to number 10. And I'm going to say my number 10 is going to be this one. This is going to be way different than most everything else we've said. I'm going to say that, and I've talked about this in the past before, but if we're looking for something, if you haven't done this yet, you got to pick it up. You got to read a Sand County Almanac. That's going to be my last suggestion. I just think it's one of those, it's short, it's an easy read, and it's one of those just foundational sets of ideas about conservation and protecting and conserving these places and animals. There's so much in there that Aldo Leopold talks about that resonates true still today. If you read that whole book through and don't feel inspired to take action on items 1 through 9, I don't know what will. So read that one. The first half of the book is kind of like little anecdotes and stories, and you might be like, oh, this is interesting stuff, but I don't get how it ties directly to conservation and the land ethic and stuff. But read that, because the second half of the book gets into the real meat and potatoes of these ideas, and you're going to close the book on that last page and be like, wow, yeah, all right, we've got work to do. So that's my last one, Sam. Have you read a Sand County Almanac?
I have not.
Sam.
No, just listen. Wait. It is ordered.
Perfect. Okay.
I literally just ordered it on Amazon. So
good. You're gonna thank me for that one. You're gonna like that.
Yeah, I'll probably have it read by the time this podcast goes live. So yes, I've read it.
Okay, yeah, we'll edit this out and just say, yeah, I've read it.
Yep, I have read it.
Oh man, I think it's an easy, quick read, but it's it's just full of the good stuff. So I don't know, Sam. I know we each had more ideas, but I figure if we overload people, it's probably more than anything than anyone can handle. But I think there's some good stuff here. We've got. I'll recap the list, and my idea here is, like, obviously none of us can do all this stuff, but if each one of us maybe could do a couple of these things, we figure out what's the right fit for us and what do we have the time for, or the money, or what's the right situation, whatever it is that works for you. If each one of us could tackle a couple things, that's a really good step in the right direction for these places, these animals that we care about so much, that make, all the rest of the podcast topics we've had, all these conversations about how to hunt down a buck on foot, or how to plant food plots that'll lead to better archery kills in November, or, whatever it is, that stuff that we love that gets us pumped up to be out there in the tree all day in November. It's these little projects, these little emails and phone calls, reading these books, getting this information, all this stuff's what makes that possible. So a recap of our 10 ideas. Our number 1, join a conservation group or a bunch. Definitely check out the Conservation Crossing Shirton Initiative. Number 2, try to do your first volunteer project for a conservation group. Go out there and do a little something. Number 3, get a duck stamp. Buy some duck stamps. It's an easy way to send money directly to habitat work. Number 4, if you own land, learn a little bit about conservation easements and see if that might be a good fit for your special place. Number 5, go shopping for hunting and firearms and ammo and all that good stuff, and feel good about it, and tell your significant other that you're making a positive difference and not just spending your family's money. Number 6, learn a little bit more about this 30 by 30 initiative. Go to huntfish3030.com to learn about that. Number 7, talk more about this stuff on social media. Yeah, post your big buck pictures. Yeah, post your big fish pictures. But toss in a couple where you talk about that habitat work you did, or that volunteer project, or some important issue that you care about. Number 8 is, if you own or lease land and you can manage and do habitat work, let's try one non-deer project this year. Consider that as an idea to add to your list. Number 9 was vote for conservation. Take the time to learn about these people and what they support, and pay attention to that in the ballot box, and then also be the squeaky wheel afterwards. And then last, number 10, read a Sand County Almanac and get inspired by the wisdom of Aldo Leopold. That's what we got, Sam. What do you think?
I'd say that's a pretty good list.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy with it. I feel like there's a good number of these things I can do myself right now. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, me too. And there's definitely some things in there that, I'm going to try to, do and use going forward.
Man, this is good stuff. I'm glad that we could just get to talk about this stuff and think about these things. And it's just, it's sometimes easy to look at the news or see some documentary or whatever. And I mentioned earlier, like, feel overwhelmed. That's another thing. But it's also easy to see this barrage of bad news related to this animal going extinct, or this amount of the landscape is gone, or this place is in danger, or this place got burned to the ground, or this lake is polluted. I mean, it could get depressing. It can get depressing. And so I always go back to what Yvon Chouinard often says, which is the best cure for depression is action. So whenever I start seeing that stuff and I'm like, damn, like, what are my kids going to be left with? That feeling always leads me to think next, okay, what can I do right now? Is there some little bit of action I can take? And I think that's the most important thing I can add to this conversation, I guess, today, is just the best cure for depression is action. So if you start bumming out about something you're seeing out there, do something. And yeah, Sam, you're a great example of someone doing that.
Well, thank you. But yeah, like you said, just take action. Pick one of those things on this list and just get after it.
So if people want to follow what you're doing, if they want to stay in touch and up to date on your projects, those that are going right now or those in the future, where should they go? Where can they tap into that?
So, personal page, mostly post to Instagram, is just at Sam Soholt. And then Public Land Tees pages are publiclandtees.com. And the Instagram page is at Public Land Tees. And then we have, starting to grow the content on the Soholt Brothers YouTube channel. So, that's pretty much where you can find everything that we're up to. Sweet.
Well, yeah. Is there anything important that we left off? Is there anything that you were dying to talk about that I've horribly mismanaged this conversation and missed on?
No, man, I think we covered it. I just really appreciate you letting me hop on and talk about everything that we're up to, all the initiatives and kind of the journey that led to that point. And yeah, I mean, the goal is just to continue to figure out ways to do more of that.
Yeah, well, I love it. I appreciate you making the time to do this, and also, like I mentioned a second ago, you are the example that people can look to of what can happen when folks make conservation cool and make it trendy and make it out there, right? You've used your platform to share these initiatives, these stories, these experiences, these learnings you've had, and it's gotten a lot of people interested in it. So, I mean, keep fighting the good fight, man. And I'm gonna keep looking to you and being inspired and trying to do a few things myself. So, thank you, Sam.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, but long way to go. But yeah, again, thank you.
And that, I'd say, is a wrap. All right, that's going to do it. Appreciate you guys listening. Thank you for following along for this whole series. I hope you've learned a few things. I hope you've come away with some new ideas of what you could do yourself when it comes to keeping these wild places and wild animals around, so we can have a whole lot of great times in the future. Good hunts, good memories, things to take our kids out there to enjoy, opportunities to fill our freezer, all of that good stuff. I want to make sure it's around for a long, long time. So I'm excited that many of you are going to be doing the good work to help make that happen, and I'm going to do my best to be right there alongside you. So thanks again, and until next time, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.